Book of Heaven, Volume 19, Part September 7th, 1926. How God has his throne, his royal palace, his stable and fixed dwelling. The divine will is sun. The human will is a spark formed by the tip of the rays of the supreme volition. I was about to resume my flight in the supreme volition, to make my usual visit in the kingdom of the divine will, and to extend myself within its boundaries, in order to let my I love you, my adoration, my thank you, echo for each created thing. Now, as I was about to do this, I thought to myself, if God is everywhere, why take flight in the divine volition to go up to the height of the heavens, before the Supreme Majesty, as though carrying all human wills of the generations on my little lap, to do my act of subjugation, of love, and of abandonment for each rebellious will, in order to conquer the divine will to come and reign upon earth, dominating and triumphant in the midst of creatures. Since it is everywhere, I can also do it from here. While I was thinking of this, my sweet Jesus, moving in my interior, told me, "My daughter, look at the sun. Its light descends and fills the whole earth. But the sun remains always up there, under the vault of the heavens, with all majesty in its sphere, lording and dominating over everyone and everything with its light. But even though it does not descend down below, it gives the same effects. It communicates the same goods by means of its rays, as if it itself would descend from the height of its sphere. More so because, if the sun descended from its height, since the earth is much smaller, and creatures are incapable of sustaining a light so great, in descending, it would ignite and eclipse everything with its light and with its heat. But since all things created by me contain the similarity with the bosom of mercy of their Creator, the sun remains up there, emitting its rays full of goodness, of love, and of goods for the little earth. Now, if the sun does this, image of the true light of the divine sun, much more so does God, true Son of light, of justice, and of love. My Majesty does not move from the height of its throne, but is always firm and stable in its place, in its celestial royal palace. More than sun, it emits its endless rays, that carry its effects, its goods, and communicate its very life, as if it itself would descend to those who want to receive it. So what it does not do by descending in person, it does through the emanation of its endless rays, by locating in them to give its very life and its goods to the human generations. Now, my daughter, because of your condition as creature, and because of your office of the mission of the Supreme Fiat, it is your duty to go up on those very rays that the Supreme Majesty emits, to bring yourself before it, and fulfill your office in the bosom of the eternal Sun, plunging into the origin from which you came, in order to take the fullness of my will, as much as is possible for creature, to know it and to manifest it to others. Now, you must know what bonds of identification exist between the divine will and the human will, and therefore why I so much love and want, by right of creation, of paternity, of love, and of justice, that the human will would surrender its place to mine, and throwing itself into its arms like a little child, would let itself be held, nourished, and dominated by it. In creating man, the Supreme Being placed my will out into the field, although all of our attributes concurred with it as a consequence, and naturally. But the Supreme Volition was the primary act, by which it took to heart the life of all creation, including man, therefore making itself the life of all, dominating everything, making everything its own, since everything had come out of it. By justice, everything was to be its own. More than sun, my will emitted its rays, and with the tips of these rays, animating the human nature, it formed the will in the creature. Do you see, then, what the will is in the human generations? Many different tips of rays that were like sparks in creatures, to form the will in them, but without detaching these sparks from the ray unleashed by the center of the sun of the Supreme Volition. So all human generations turn around this sun, because each creature contains the tip of one ray of this eternal sun of my will. Now, what is not the affront for this sun, to see the circumference of these rays, whose tips form the will of each creature, converted, transmuted into darkness, into human nature, denying the light, the dominion, and the life of that sun that gave its will with so much love, so that its will and those of creatures might be one, and so it might be able to form divine life in them. Can there be a stronger, more stable, and inseparable bond than the one between the center of the sun and its rays? Light is indivisible, and if it could be separated, the detached part would go wandering and would end up turning into darkness. So there is such union of identification between the divine will and the human as to be comparable to the union that exists between the sun and the solar ray, between heat and light. Would it not be a right of the sun to dominate its rays and to receive their subjection, so as to form its kingdom of light over its very solar circumference? So it is for my will. When the creature withdraws from it, it remains as though without kingdom, without dominion, without subjects. It feels itself being robbed of that which is its own. Each act which does not depend upon its volition is a tearing, a theft made against its light. and in seeing itself being robbed of its light, converted into darkness, it agonizes more than a mother who sees the fruit of her womb being snatched away from her, not to give him life, but to kill him. So the losses that my will suffers when the creature is not united to its center and does not live of the volition of its light are divine losses and of infinite value. The evils for creatures, the ugliness they acquire, are incalculable and indescribable. My will remains without kingdom in the creatures, and they remain stripped, without inheritance, with no right to any good whatsoever. Therefore there is nothing more important, nothing greater, that shall establish the balance, the order, the harmony, the likeness between creator and creature than my will. This is why I want to make known what the divine will and the human will are, so that we may reconcile, and my will may acquire its kingdom, and creatures may be given back all the goods they lost. September 9th, 1926. When Jesus speaks, he gives the good that his word encloses. In the divine will there shall be neither slaves, nor rebels, nor laws, nor commands. I was thinking, how much power, how many goods are enclosed in the holy divine will. How everything is peace in it. Everything is happiness. Nor does one need commands in order to operate, but one's own nature feels so much strength of good within itself that it cannot help doing it. What happiness to feel one's own nature converted into good, into sanctity, into strength. So in the kingdom of the Supreme Will, there shall be no laws, but everything shall be love, and one's nature shall be converted into divine law in such a way that of its own it shall want to do what the Supreme Fiat wants it to do. Now, while I was thinking of this, my always lovable Jesus, with his usual light that he sent forth from his intelligence, told me, "My daughter, everything I have told you about my will has been gifts that I have given you. Knowledge is not enough if one does not possess the good which that very knowledge contains. If it were not so, the knowledge would render you unhappy, because knowing a good and not possessing it is always a sorrow. More so since I do not know how to leave things half done, but only fully complete. Therefore first I dispose the soul, I expand her capacity, and then I give the knowledge together with the good it contains. And since the knowledges about my will are divine, this is why her nature remains endowed with the likeness of the divine nature, and more than a daughter, she does not wait for a command, but without being told, feels honored to do what her father wants. Laws and commands are for servants, for slaves, for rebels. In the kingdom of the Supreme Fiat, there shall be no servants, no slaves, no rebels, but one shall be the will, that of God and that of the creature, and therefore one shall be the life. This is also the reason why I am saying so much and so many things about my will, to abound in gifts, not only for you, but for any soul who wants to come to live in my kingdom, so that she may lack nothing, need nothing, but possess the source of goods within herself. I would not act as the God that I am, great, powerful, rich, magnanimous, if in having to constitute the kingdom of my will, I did not endow those who must live in it with the prerogatives and qualities that my very will possesses. Even more, you must know that just as all things have come out of that single act of God, so must everything return to that single act that has no succession of acts. But only the one who leaves everything to live only of my will can return to that single act, because as the soul lives in it, everything she does converts into light, and her acts are naturally incorporated and identified with the eternal light of the Son of my will, and as a consequence, they become one single act with the single act of it. On the other hand, in one who operates outside of it, one can see not light, but each of the materials that her work contains, that cannot be incorporated with the light of the single act of God, and therefore it shall show immediately that it is not our thing, that it does not belong to us. So anything which is not done by virtue of the divine fiat shall not be recognized by God. Suppose you wanted to unite light and darkness, copper and gold, rocks and earth. Would one not distinguish with clarity the light from the darkness, the copper from the gold, the rocks from the earth? And this because these are materials, one different from the other. But if you united altogether, light with light, darkness with darkness, gold with gold, you would not be able to distinguish nor separate the first light from the second, the first darkness from the second, the first mass of gold from the second. So it is with my will. What it itself does in the creature is light, and it is no wonder that it becomes incorporated in the single act of its eternal light. Therefore, in these times so stormy, and with a vertiginous race in evil, I could not give greater grace than making known that I want to give the great gift of the kingdom of the supreme fiat. And as a confirmation of this, I am preparing it within you with so many knowledges and gifts, so that nothing may be lacking to the triumph of my will. Therefore, be attentive on the deposit of this kingdom that I am making in you. After this, I felt concerned because holy obedience had imposed on me not to neglect even one word of that which my sweet Jesus might say to me. Well, I easily leave them out, because I am convinced that it is not necessary to write and to entrust to the paper certain intimate things, certain outpourings that Jesus makes to my poor soul, but that they should remain in the depths of the heart. So I was praying that he would give me the grace not to fail the obedience. And Jesus, moving in my interior, told me, "My daughter, if the one who guides you and directs you gives you this obedience, it means that he has understood that it is I who speaks to you, as well as the value that even a single word of mine contains. My word is light, and is full of life, and the one who possesses life can give it. More so, since my word contains the creative strength, and therefore a single word of mine can create innumerable lives of grace, lives of love, lives of light, lives of my will within souls. You yourself shall not be able to comprehend the long way that a single word of mine can cover. Those who have ears shall listen. Those who have heart shall be wounded. So the one who guides you is right in giving you this obedience. You do not know how I assist him and remain around him while he reads my writings and yours about my will, so as to make him comprehend all the strength of the truths and of the great good contained in them. And he turns around my will, and by virtue of the light that he feels, he is sending you this obedience. Therefore, be attentive, and I shall help you and facilitate that which seems difficult to you. You must know that my heart is swollen. It agonizes and sighs because I want to make known the kingdom of the supreme Fiat, the great goods that are in it, and the great good that those who shall possess it shall receive. It is precisely in my heart that I keep it, and I feel my heart explode, for I want to let it out. Don't you want, then, to give me this relief, so that by letting it out, my heart may deflate, and so it shall not have to agonize and sigh with sorrowful sighs any more? And you shall do this by making known what I manifest to you about my will, because when you do this, you give me the field in order to open the ways and prepare the place in which I must lay the kingdom of my will. And if you do not manifest what I say to you, you close these ways, and my heart swells even more. Therefore let me do, and you follow me, and do not be concerned. You have reached the end of the Book of Heaven, Volume 19, Part 19. Fiat.